Ready? Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here to talk about a very important topic, and that is protecting our markets for what we grow in America and produce so well, but only has value if we have a market for it. I'm with the American Farm Bureau Federation, and we joined Farmers for Free Trade about a year ago because we knew that we needed to do more and more and more to tell the story about how important trade is to our farmer members. And there's nobody better to talk about that than the farmers themselves. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to hear from some farmers about what the trade uncertainty and tariffs are doing to them and their operations directly. So without any delay, I want to introduce a couple of our speakers, and then we'll get started. Our first speaker today is the Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Connecticut, Stephen Reviczky, and he's going to talk about the impact to his state. Mr. Reviczky.
Well, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here. Just a few minutes ago, I ended my term as president of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. And one of the things that is critically important to all of my colleagues across the country is free and fair trade. That trade is critically important to American farmers all across this nation. This is a time when farmers and ranchers are stressed in terms of prices for their commodities, and it is absolutely essential that international trade be strengthened. It is critical that NAFTA be modernized. We do substantial trade with our neighbors to the south and north, our number one and number three trade partners for the United States. And our farmers and ranchers rely on those markets. We need to maintain those markets, we need to expand those markets, and we need open and fair trade for agriculture in the United States of America. A modernized NAFTA, I had the opportunity to spend time at the Tri-National Accord in October with our partners from Mexico and Canada. This trade arrangement works for all of our countries, and it is essential. There is a lot of stress in the agricultural community across the country. For me, as Commissioner of Agriculture here in the state of Connecticut, it is really important to have trade. Our dairy industry is stressed. Again, we need fair trade. We need to open markets to our products. From a small state, a state where we sell a lot of our products directly to consumer, people might ask, why am I so concerned as the Commissioner of Agriculture from Connecticut? And I can tell you that it's important for our products to be sold to consumers. So when New York products enter the international market, they're not left here domestically to compete with Connecticut farmers. So trade is important for those states where their commodities are moving internationally. For us here in Connecticut, it's important that we have access to the domestic market, so we encourage our neighbors, our larger neighbors who produce much more than we can here in the state, to move into those international markets and leave the domestic market to us. So I'm very supportive of modernized NAFTA. We need to get with it, and we need to keep this ball rolling. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to us about the importance of trade to your state, Connecticut. Next, we're going to hear about the importance of our markets, our foreign markets, to the state of Vermont from the Secretary there, Anson Tebbetts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be here, and as you know, Vermont shares a border with Canada. We've had tremendous relationships with Canada. We continue to do that. As part of our administration in Vermont, we want to strengthen those. We want personal contact with them. And there's two things in Vermont that we kind of don't like to mess with, and one is milk and the other is maple. And right now we've got some heartburn involved in maple and also milk. And we're a small state, but with trade with Canada, it's substantial. For example, at risk with all this heartburn over trade, about $2.2 million is at risk with just maple alone in Canada. We also have a big problem with trade when it relates to our dairy products, and you'll hear more from Agri-Mark about that, but we have a lot at stake when we trade with China. Vermont alone, we have about $12 million at stake with China. So that's, we think we're a small world, but we're not. And those markets are really important. And I think what's happened is there's so much uncertainty, and when there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, people pull back. They don't know what to do. They don't know if it's going to be there. And if we lose these markets, and there are plenty of other countries that are willing to step in and fill that void, we lose those markets. And some of these markets have taken years and years and years to develop. And then suddenly, just overnight, they disappear. So it becomes vitally important that we continue to build those relationships. And as the state of Vermont, we'll continue to work with any country that wants to work with us. I know Canada is important, and we'll continue to build those relationships. And we appreciate your leadership on this particular issue across the country, and we hope that we'll get to a better place soon, which will help our farmers, but also help our consumers as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Tebbetts. And now we're going to hear from 4 farmers in the region here about how this is affecting them personally. I'll introduce all of them and just let them come up and speak as they're ready. Amanda Voyer, who is a maple producer in Vermont. J.P. Velati of East Coast Kelp Farms. Robert Wellington, who is Vice President for Economics, Communications, and Legislative Affairs for the Agri-Mark Co-op, and James Jacker, a dairy farmer in Connecticut. So I'll invite you guys just to come up and talk.
So do we want to go in order? Or?
Go ahead. And
all right, I'm here. So hello everyone, thank you Commissioner for inviting me. I was a traditional oysterman in Connecticut, and I don't know if anyone came out on the boats yesterday, but I know we had about 50, 60 people that we ran out. It's kind of an unusual thing in Connecticut because, or for farming, because we farm underwater, but we don't really export. So this was a really strange thing for us to be invited to. However, there's a good reason for us to be here. Our oysters, we don't export for a lot of reasons. It's not economical to go to China because of the shell weights, and Europe already produces. However, because we were already involved in aquaculture, and then from the Commissioner's office, there was a new program for leasing kelp to grow sea kelp, which is a sea vegetable. We started growing that in probably about 4 years now. We ended up through a different series of lease applications and partnerships. We have the largest kelp farm in New England. So all of a sudden, free trade makes a big difference to us because we have not had great success in the domestic market in getting everyone to eat kelp. It's a good, healthy product, but it's not there yet. And so maybe 10%, 20% of what we grow we'll keep domestically. The rest of it, as we're growing it and we're learning how to process, we're figuring other markets. The Chinese market is huge, the Asian market, Koreans as well, and we can ship overseas. We have a premium product that we grow in Connecticut. It's radiation-free, and that's a really strange thing to say on your marketing, but we do have a radiation-free product. They don't have that in Asia. So we're almost a boutique high-end product, and it has the New York, New England name that is recognized. Over in Europe, they wild harvest kelp, and that's not as sustainable. We farm it. We plant usually November, December, and we grow it out until May, June at the very latest, so it's about a 6-month crop. It's a very nice, light, leafy vegetable. So the Europeans are very interested. We've learned how to do other things and make industrial uses. So we've turned it into fertilizer. For plants, we've turned it into animal feed. All of a sudden, as we're growing this, and we sent to Canada for cows, we've done some work on that. It can be sent to Mexico for hothouse flowers. It helps produce the buds at the very end. There's a lot of things that we can do, so we're really interested to get involved in this. And so that's why we were here today. So we just wanted to support you. Remember, at Farm Bureau, we grow about 12,000 acres through our oysters, but in our kelp farm, I think we've got about maybe another 200 acres. So we're real small, but we have the capacity of growing over 1 million pounds quite easily. So all of a sudden, you end up with all this material, and trade is important, and we're going to have to export it. So thank you for having us.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Wellington. I'm with Agri-Mark Dairy Cooperative, our farmers own Cabot cheese. And we have about 1,000 members around New England and upstate New York. Trade is getting more and more important to us. Most of our cheese is sold domestically, but we make other products that have great international sales. For example, we have a plant in Middlebury, Vermont that makes about 50 million pounds of cheese a year. But people forget that when you put 10 pounds of milk in a plant, you get 1 pound of cheese, and you get 9 pounds of whey, okay? And that used to be flushed down the toilet. Well, they don't do that now, okay? You have to dry it, and we've built an incredibly strong market overseas. We make about 40 million pounds of whey products, and most of that is sold overseas, just about all of it, and probably at least 30 of that 40 goes to China. And China uses huge amounts of these whey products, particularly to feed their swine industry. 15, 20 years ago, about 5% of our milk went overseas. In fact, it was less than 5%. And it went as dry dairy products for the most part. Lately, it's been going up to 17% of our milk has been going overseas nationally. And that's been used, that's like more than 1 day out of 7 of the milk produced in this country goes overseas. And it has helped our price, it had helped the demand for it, but now suddenly that's wavering, because the countries don't want it. It was mentioned that Mexico and Canada are leading suppliers of that. And that's having an impact even on us in Mexico. We make non-fat dry milk powder. We sell it pretty much in the Northeast, but we have partners that work with us from California and the Southwest. And they go to Mexico. And if they don't go to Mexico, they'll come into New York and Connecticut and Vermont, like the commissioner was saying, and suddenly we're competing with them, and it drives the price down for everybody. So it's crucially important for the dairy industry, all aspects of the dairy industry, whether you're a farmer-run co-op that's invested in these plants, or whether you're a proprietary handler like Hood or others that have investments as well. We're all looking for opportunities. I won't speak for Hood, but Hood has just put a huge amount of money into a Batavia, New York plant that's making UHT products. And they want to sell those overseas. That's ultra-high temperature, long shelf life. But if they don't have the opportunity to do that, that comes right home to farmers, because probably, I would say at least 20 million pounds of their milk a month is going to go into that plant if it's operating, if they have sales. So everything backs right up to it, and it backs up the farmers, and they've been struggling a lot, as you're going to hear from James Jack here.
Well, hello everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here representing dairy farmers, and especially a dairy farmer from Connecticut, and actually representing dairy farmers from all across New England, New England and New York, being part of the Agri-Mark Cabot board as well. So trade is near and dear to my heart. No second guessing that. Trade is extremely important. And why is it so important? Because as a dairy farmer, it's tough. Okay, I'm hearing around the room what I've just heard, but I want to just give you a little bit quick fact here about the economics in the dairy industry right now. It is mentally challenging. It is financially challenging. It is extremely stressful. I came today with my wife. I have 2 kids. One's in sophomore in college going for vet. And my son is home in the high school with an FFA program. Agriculture is near and dear to their heart. Okay, it is a staple in our family, and it's a staple in most dairy farm families to have this farm ready and have the ability to go to the next generation. It's really near and dear to our hearts. So with that said, the financial distress that's really on the farm level, a lot of it is around trade. What's happening right now is really unacceptable. It's something that we need to resolve These markets are hugely important for us. Okay, even though it may not be just in the form of milk when I say dairy, but it's the non-fat dry milk, it's the powder, it's the cheese, it's the butter, it's all of these products, the whey proteins, it's the permeate, it's all of these products that go overseas that directly impact our pay price here locally. We want sustainable farms here in New England. We want farms that are going to be here, they're going to be the rural infrastructure of what we all drive by every day and live and breathe. But a lot is going to change if this doesn't get resolved. There's going to be rapid consolidation in the dairy industry. I really don't think that's what we want. There's going to be huge economic losses to families that are going to be forever gone. So we really need to keep this front and center. But I'm really optimistic of where dairy farmers take on trade. We're proactively pushing, trying to make sure that we're out there supporting trade across the globe. We're out there trying to make sure that the markets that we have the potential of losing, that we're working through to make sure that they're going to be there down the road. We need to set up shop in other parts of the world. We need to be there with the ability to train, to educate, get food in their mouths, and create the appetite that we actually need for our dairy products. The farms here in New England, in Connecticut, have the land, we have the resources, we have the technology, we have all of the passion to feed the world beyond the United States. And I think that's something that we take home, that we want to take part in. And it's very frustrating that we get these roadblocks put in that could have catastrophic effects on the number of farms that we deal with. So as far as Agri-Mark in Cabot, we are owners of that cooperative. We're owners of that brand. Okay? We have investments in those facilities that I heard in Vermont, right? We have investments in Cabot, Chateauguay, New York, Middlebury, Vermont, West Springfield, Massachusetts. We have those investments, and we need to make sure that they're there for future generations to come. And lastly, I would just say that when we look beyond trade, trade can be commodity products, but I really think we need to focus on having trade being more value-added products. Okay, we have the ability to have value-added products into the other countries, and I think it's a great opportunity that we have before us, and we have a lot of mouths to feed across the world. That's what keeps me going every day. We have the ability to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me here. I'm Amanda Voyer with the Vermont Maple Sugar Makers Association, and I think probably one of the most important things to point out, as Secretary Tebbetts had said, is our relationship in the maple industry with Canada is a very strong one currently. There is an international organization called the International Maple Syrup Institute that's comprised of all the maple-producing states and provinces in Canada, and we work together on research efforts, on education, on marketing. So that relationship is a strong one. It's a good one. So it's certainly not anything we'd want to see any negative impact that comes from the tariff issue. Clearly, that's something between the governments, not something between members of our industry. So the other important thing to note is Canada actually produces nearly 70% of the world's maple syrup. So there isn't a great need necessarily for Vermont syrup to be exported into Canada. However, as Secretary Tebbetts pointed out, that is our primary export market currently. So it does impact our industry. We do, as a small state, we produce nearly 50% of the nation's maple syrup here in Vermont. So one of the things that we face as a challenge is just making sure that there's an open market available because our production has increased dramatically in the last decade. So as long as there's a free and open market for us to be able to get our syrup into, then we're in a good place because syrup isn't produced anywhere else in the world. So we just need those markets. We don't want any of those limitations placed on us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Hoffman, and I'm the Deputy Director of Farmers for Free Trade. I want to first thank our partners in this event today, NASDA, We've been so proud to work with ag commissioners across the country as we're lifting up voices of farmers. Thanks, Lynn, for the partnership with Farm Bureau as well. You've been with us. We've been to many states together because we recognize that this is not just one commodity. It's not just one industry. This is a national situation that we're in right now. We even learned about kelp today. That's a new one. Wow.
Very early on.
It's early on. But I think it's also a very important point. It is, because agriculture, the little known secret is it's a $20 billion trade surplus. And that will continue to be a huge economic driver. We're hearing about the innovation and creativity and what's happening in terms of diversification of products. So there's tremendous opportunity to continue to grow these products. So Farmers for Free Trade has worked together with many of our associations. We are a 501c4. We are a nonprofit bipartisan organization. We're led by Senator Baucus from Montana, Senator Richard Luker from Indiana, who have worked together for decades to bring together the voices and representation from their states. But the best thing about Farmers for Free Trade, it's the people who are here today. And we've had the just distinct pleasure to work across the country. And our mission is to empower, enable, and accelerate the voices of our farmers and ranchers, particularly during this very important part of trade. And some of you have heard me say this many times, trade is an active part of what we can do. We can be a part of these negotiations. We can weigh in and give good advice to our administration officials, our state and local officials, because at the end of the day, trade reflects your farm, your community, and it's the economic driver. So across the country, we've been very busy at agriculture shows, even in New England. Most recently, we were in New York, and it's such a pleasure to be here today. One thing we do at each of these events is also empower. So I have a handful of Sharpies. I have one of our famous banners. You're also seeing the big buttons. So we do have opportunities. If you are a producer, you can go online, you can record a video on www.farmersforfreetrade.com. Share your voice. We'd love to hear you, get more folks involved, go to your farm, go to your field, maybe underwater not so much, but in the middle, and I even heard we got some cranberry bogs here. Tell your story. It's going to augment it. And we're also going to send these banners. So we've signed many of these banners. Over 25,000 producers across the country have been signing these banners. They've been to Washington, D.C., they're going to state capitals, they're going to members. We're going to take a moment, and I'm going to let them pick their Sharpie, and take a moment to sign our banner here, and then we'll turn it over for some questions from the audience. So with that, we'll give some. Thanks. And we will stand, but we're going to hold that so it does not tip over.
I think the Connecticut commissioner should go first.
I'll hold this up just so this one. A memorable signature.
Here today, the financial health of agriculture in rural America depends on international trade. And agriculture needs a modernized NAFTA. And with that, we will entertain questions if you have any.
Commissioner.
Yes.
I am from Alaska. And as
Welcome.
you probably- We know seafood is very important to us up there, and export is a huge component of what we do. How has the trade situation with China impacted your the Northeast fishing industry?
So I know it has had significant impact on exports from Massachusetts. And in terms of lobsters from Maine, the #1 exporter of Maine lobsters overseas is actually located here in Connecticut, in Groton, Connecticut, the Garbo Company. And most of those lobsters go into the Asian market. And it is decimating the incomes of those lobster producers in Maine. Yes, sir.
I heard that trade is really good from everybody, but what would it take to fix the situation? I heard NAFTA, but I'm also hearing about China. So could somebody explain what's up in China, or what's going on that's causing the problems with trade?
Sure.
I'll try. So, the problems with China are far beyond agriculture. In fact, agriculture, I think, is a bright spot. So we're not the problem here, but we're certainly on the tip of the spear as far as the impacts go. So as far as what it takes to solve it, I think it's going to be very difficult. But certainly, one thing I do know is we have to stop escalating it, and that's what's been happening over the past few months. And I would just like to add too, since I'm up here again, is that, farmers are busy folks, and you guys know that, but these guys taking time out of their busy day to be here, that should tell you how important this issue is to them and their bottom lines and their communities and the people they work with. It's just huge, and not just for themselves, but for their communities and their families. So I just can't emphasize enough how important it is, and that's why they're here today. I'm just blown away by the innovation that's exhibited here today. Kelp, whey, probably other things too, and they're turning it into new products. They're growing their businesses. They're trying to hire people. But they can't do that if they don't have a market for what they produce.